Ed, welcome to the show, my man.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's an interesting time right now that we're starting our conversation as more and more companies are opening up. More and more companies are asking employees to go back to work. So what I love to do is always start the show with the emotional part of how the heck did you get out of bed for the last 18 months? I know we have a lot of data questions we have to talk about, but with the pandemic and shelter in place and self-isolation, we love to hear how people literally just was able to get out of bed each day.
I guess I'm in the minority. I actually didn't have a bad time last year.
That's
everything shut down. Yeah, there was not a lot of work to be done. So just went to the beach, hung out at the parks, went for walks in nature. Honestly, I really enjoyed myself. It was nice to get out and actually, instead of just driving past places, be able to go and enjoy it. Went and saw most of the waterfalls in Minnesota, which actually aren't that many, to be honest, but makes for an easy summer thing to do. And the fact that most people were staying at home, locked in, I could go to a lake, hang out at the beach, and social distancing was not a problem because there was hardly anybody there. So I actually enjoyed last year. Really got to unplug, caught up on some reading, and spend time with family. My wife gave birth to our daughter last summer. That was quite interesting, going to the hospital in the middle of a pandemic, I will say that. Quite a different experience from previous births in the hospital.
Oh, well, first off, that's congratulations on that.
Yeah, family and nature.
We need to ask the name.
All good. What?
We need to ask the name of the baby. I mean, did you name it a pandemic name or just a regular name? We need to have the name now. You can't just say we had a baby and not finish the story.
Oh no, my wife, she has her names already picked out well in advance. So baby's name is Isabella.
I love it.
Yeah, I was like, well, okay, that works for me, so I didn't object.
No, I love it. When we talk about this first part of how to get out of bed, what I'm delighted to hear about it is you, like so many people, have been able to do things to get back to a nice reflective place, a nice place of balance. I almost feel like the world just needed a little bit of a timeout to get readjusted. And I think that depending on how old you are and where you are in your life, those moments are precious. Some others are those that could be a little bit frustrating. But the fact that you're able to spend this much time with nature and family, it's winning. So it's great to hear.
Yeah.
And then as far as, as we move to like data conversations, walk us through, when did you get into the data space? And there's lots of things we want to talk about, so you can pick that thread up anywhere, but how did you get into it? And let's dig into some of the topics.
Oh, I've been in data for a long time. Started back with my internships in college, and shortly after that, I worked as a market analyst. And so data was just always a part of the job. The current, of course, back then there was nothing called data science or big data or anything like that. This was back in the 90s. Now, it's been like 10 years since I've been in the whole data space that we currently call it, building out data science, big data practices, working on things like data governance. And, it's still a space that I think is evolving, and there's a lot of misconceptions in terms of what really makes something successful. And sometimes you can see it on LinkedIn, those that have been in it for a long time. The things they focus on versus what people new to the field focus on tend to be very different. I see a lot of new people in the field focusing on tools, technology, much more about vision and human behavior for those that have been at it for a long time.
I'm glad you said that. A few of our guests have been doing synthetic data for vision and autonomous cars. you know, the more I look at synthetic data, the more I feel like that's also maybe it's something that's been around, but I love that it's getting more attention now. Are you seeing that as well?
Really depends on the business case that needs to be solved. What I see is much more of a need to understand really what's happening when the data is being created. What type of events happening? What are the drivers that create that environment that ended up creating the data? And unfortunately, most businesses are still pretty much lacking in that understanding. The data comes in, somebody has to interpret it, but they're really interpreting from their own perspective, not really the perspective of those that created it. That still is a huge challenge, I think, for a lot of organizations.
Now, to that, are moving things to the cloud or the data lake or, you know, accessing data, I guess the next part is the access part, right? So you want to ask new questions and access all the data. I guess, is that the ladder that we're trying to climb?
It's really not the access to the data, it's really the understanding of the data. So data to me is always interpreted. There isn't any of this like, you know, oh, I just listen to the data. Well, data doesn't speak. And also data doesn't buy anything. The person who generated the data or the organization is the one doing the buying. So that's really what I focus on. And that's really still a big gap, I think, for a lot of teams. I recently left an org where, you know, a lot of the analysts, they were struggling to understand that whole human aspect of it. They were just so focused on the tool. It's like, hey, the tool doesn't buy anything. We actually pay for the tool. So your emphasis is incorrect to actually get to the goal that leadership truly wants. And that, you know, it's, if you look at some of the like the data science programs out there, I don't really know of any that really emphasize human behavior. There are behavioral scientists getting into the space, and I think that's great, that are starting to demand that we really bring that focus to the table. But it's still very far and in between for a lot of organizations to have.
Well, I think you also bring up an interesting point. If you're someone starting their career in data, would you have them chase a data set? Would you have them chase a management program, chase a good boss? Because I mean, I think that dimension is changing on what people coming out of school to look for. So what advice would you give in the space to someone who's looking to start?
I would definitely say find a good boss. The data sets, I've dealt with some as small as 10 terabytes. You know, you can fit that on a hard drive you can buy at Costco. And I've dealt with others which are like, you know, petabytes, and you're dealing with hybrid systems. And it really all depends on, do you have leadership that one is going to allow you to learn in the space? And two, do they have the vision to really take you to that next level? It's like, you know, what's personalization mean? This is something I deal with a lot, is personalization. For some companies, it's like, hey, let's just slap someone's name on a templated email, and that's personalization. For others, it's truly understanding really what's the relevancy, the true recency, frequency, monetization of that interaction with the consumer, and really making it about understanding the experience they're going after. That's going to give you a very different experience based off of what you walk away with from that job, versus somebody to just say, hey, well, we're just going to do some recommenders and templates. So yeah, data sets, company title, I would say ignore all those things. Look for a leader that truly wants to build stuff and is going to allow their team to really build things. That to me has always been the biggest differentiator.
I agree with that on many levels. One, coming into a space, you know, good fundamentals, understand time management, communication skills, how you think, how you take in the discovery of the questions that you need to be answering. Because I think the data will always be new, changing. The technologies, the software will always be new and improving. Maybe even low code, lesser code. But right, I think good fundamentals. I think you'll be set up for success.
Yeah, you know, I've some of the things like I've done is I like make my analysts and data scientists in charge of the products that they work with. like I always say, one of the, I think the biggest tragedies in analytics is most analysts and data scientists have no idea how to run the P&L of the tools they actually use. So that's one of the things I teach them. I'm like, look, if you actually want to progress in your career and not be a data scientist till you retire, but actually move up, you're going to have to learn how to run a P&L.
Yes.
And, it's also other things like just getting them out into the field, having them interact with customers or sales reps. And, some of the data scientists, I thought they were going to pass out when I told them that, but it made them better people and better data scientists, because they were going out there and seeing, hey, this is how the data actually gets generated. These are the type of conversations that happen when the data is actually being created. And it gave them a perspective they would never get just by sitting at the office looking at them.
I'm glad we went here. I mentor a lot of college grads, recent college grads, data scientists, and that's one of the things that when I ask them, what would you like to get out of this? A lot of it is interpersonal skills, presentation skills. How do you sell, right? Because I think the more mature ones are seeing that's their gap. You can code, but everyone skews a little bit more on that introverted side, and they just, how do you make an intro? How do you make a call? How do you connect? How do you start that? And I think now in this time of this unique work environment, those skills of how to reach out they've always been important, but now it's a skill set you must have.
Yeah, it was interesting. Back in 2016, I partnered up with a friend of mine, and we did a presentation called The Softer Side of Data Science, which was focusing on the importance of soft skills. And we put this presentation together to present at conferences, and we actually got dinged and was told not relevant topic at a couple of conferences. Actually, we only got to present because one of the conferences we submitted to was actually run by a friend of ours. So he let us present, but it surprised me just how many of them were just saying like, yeah, it's not really a topic. But now it's, I think that any good data science program worth its money would have at least one class focusing on helping data scientists communicate.
Yeah. I had about the connection. I had a guest on, and he just finished his PhD program, and he was he was doing a lot of competitions with a Kaggle competitions, and that's how I met him. And I said, well, you're very well known in the Kaggle space. How did you fall into that? And he said, no one reads my papers. He's like, I need to get out there. I'm a really good scientist, right? No one reads. So I need to put myself out there as a brand, and I can do these competitions, and I can win these competitions. And then, people are going to find me. So maybe that's another way to communicate, but people are finding ways to break through the noise and stand out because, let's just say anybody can code, right? That's how you got, into the first interview. But can you pass the code check review for the second interview, right? Then can you have the skills to make it through the third interview? And I think, that balance or that awareness is what I love talking about also on the show.
Yeah, I think it also, we have to be cognizant of the fact that the space has really changed a lot. I think the need for a data strategist is fundamental for a lot of companies, but they don't understand that they're still kind of enamored by the ML engineer or the data scientist.
Yeah.
But again, look at the data science and engineering programs. How many of them teach them ROI, P&L management? I don't know any.
Yeah.
And how do they really help them to really tell a story with the data? I worked for a number of years with this guy who I would say was like one of the top 5 data scientists in the state. And he couldn't do a PowerPoint to save his life. But the guy knew what he was talking about. He just could not explain it to somebody who was not at the same level as him. And that was something that I felt was a tragedy, because he could have just gone so much more further in his career and obtained his goals much faster if somebody had actually taken the time to teach him those skills.
It's almost like you should give data scientists a choice. Do you want to be an individual? Sorry about this. You almost got to give these schools a choice. Do you want to be an individual contributor? That's great. There is a huge career path for you, and we're going to teach you coding skills. Do you want to be a leader? Do you want to be in leadership management? Then we're going to have to teach you P&L and all these other skills. I'm not saying there's a right or wrong, but a lot of the bigger companies have those paths already created.
It's really just getting the organizations to truly understand that these are actually two very different roles. And yes, they play in the same space and they work tightly together, but they're very different roles. When I have individual contributor data scientists, they're doing the coding, they're testing the algorithms. I'm building the roadmap, figuring out how do I actually create a data product out of the work that we're doing. How do I evangelize and expand the market that we're going after? Very, very different questions that we're spending our days on. We're focusing on the same algorithm, but looking at it from very different perspectives.
Absolutely agree. No, absolutely agree. So now I know there's some things that you're working on and trying to do next. We have a great community. Who can I introduce you to? How can I help you with your next move?
I recently just left the company, helped them go IPO. So I'm sitting back here trying to figure out what to do again. I like building teams, practices, helping companies get to that next level. So definitely looking for that. In the meantime, I'm going back, doing all my research, catching up. I have a stack of books here off to the side that you can't see, but still trying to figure out how do we better understand human behavior when it comes to our algorithms that we develop. I still see that as a huge gap, and I'm trying to figure out how do we better fill that gap in, and not just for like retail or the food industry where I work, but really across the board. How do we get there? I think there's a lot of organizations that could definitely benefit from that. The one thing about last year I think was really good was before that, everyone kept asking me, hey, we keep hearing data science is sexiest job, hottest area. When's that all going to end? I said, the next recession. Last year was kind of that moment, because a lot of the algorithms were historical based. And now all of a sudden you have people running out buying toilet paper like there's no tomorrow, which is not, nothing in the data would have told you that. It was really, but if you understood human behavior and when people adapt to new information, it made total sense. You knew exactly that was going to happen. I mean, back in January and February, I was telling everybody buy toilet paper. My wife thought I was nuts, to be honest. I was actually supposed to go to China. I was watching the news and I saw what was going on. I said, this is not like Zika where you hear about it and just go, whatever. This was going to blow up. So I was like, you better buy toilet paper before everybody figures it out and starts going nuts on it. So we were at home watching the news when, we had our stash avoiding the stores, and people were like, you're right. How did you know? It's like, it's just human behavior. You weren't going to see it in the data, but you could see it just based off looking at other patterns. You would have been able to spot it, what was going to happen next. But again, how do you now translate that into an algorithm? Because And how do you actually get the rest of the organization to understand it? A good example, when I was at C.H. Robinson, a Korean shipping company went out of business. Well, if you went on Twitter, you would have found like a dozen tweets in Korean saying these guys are going out of business, but all the experts in the world said they were fine. So, somebody said, well, why didn't you find these? Is that even if I did find them, I said, hey, here's 12 random tweets from like anonymous people saying these guys are in trouble, but every expert in the world says they're fine. Would you have believed me? That's still a challenge that we will have to face when it comes to any data practice. When you find anomalies like that, how do you get the rest of the organization to believe you when everything else is saying, no, everything's fine?
There's a lot there in that behavior. I want to go one other place. Is what always worried me about how the world looks like after a pandemic or after a recession was that middle layer of jobs that are just going to be automated away. I have seen more kiosks at supermarkets and CVS's and Whole Foods in a record pace. I think, so to me, that the cashier, the checkout person, the cashless, like that, to me, that whole band of job, which I think would have been replaced in 3 to 5 years, is now. So not a surprise, but I think it's just moved up by, 36 months. I'm seeing every store now, kiosk, or self-checkout. I don't know if you're seeing that, but I just feel like that's starting to say we don't need that skill set. We have the tech, we have the tooling.
The tech's there. I'll be honest. So yesterday I was out and lunchtime came around. I was with somebody. It was like, hey, we could just like order on the app and do a curbside pickup. I was like, you know what? I'd rather just go in because I kind of miss the human interaction. So I do think there's going to be some pushback, not going all the way back to how things were, but
yes.
Again, when we actually go out to eat or go shopping, it is an experience. And yeah, there are times I use the automated checkout stuff because it's like, hey, I'm in a hurry. I'm just here buying like a couple things. I just want to get it out. Other times it's like, the supermarket I go to, I actually know a lot of the cashiers. We chat. I like the conversation. I like the chat. And I think a lot of people are going to miss that. And it's a lot like the last recession we had back in 2008, where people went away from buying stuff to really having experiences. Again, I think last year caused a lot of people to kind of reflect and be like, hey, there are things I do like. So yeah, I do actually go, and even though it's slower, I'll go to the cashier or I'll actually go in and order my food instead of using the app.
Right.
Just because it's like, hey, it's the experience. Plus, I also understand that if we automate everything, all these people lose their jobs, that really impacts all of us. There really needs to be a balance. What are we trying to achieve here? Is it automation, or is it to have a better overall experience in terms of our shopping? If it's experience, which is where I'm leaning towards, well, the human aspect still has to be there because I really don't have a relationship with the automatic checkout at Target or Whole Foods or wherever. I do with the people that work there. And if they're not there, then Target's just a commodity store. You could put like, I don't know, Bob's Retail on the outside. I wouldn't care. It becomes a commodity at that point. So they got to be careful when it comes to automation. And really understand that it's truly experience that people buy. It's not the automation.
Yeah. Maybe I'm not quoting it the right way, so forgive me, but I remember when, just layering on what you said, and I'm not maybe remembering this perfectly, but I do remember something when the ATM machine came out and everyone was like, you'll never see a bank again. I think there's more banks now than ever. But everyone's like, oh, once you get an ATM machine, you'll never have to go into a bank. But I think there is something about that where that is delightful, that is an experience, but there's still banks. Is kind of what also in this weird rift that we're dealing. There are still banks. Banks didn't go away.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite supermarket to go to, they don't have any automated checkouts. You sit there and interact with people. Somebody bags your groceries. It's one of these small like natural food co-ops.
Yep.
And I like going there because really it's more of an experience. And I got a 2-year-old. He loves going there because they always give him stickers. And it makes him happy.
Right.
That's the kind of stuff that you like. Again, automated checkout's never going to give my kid a sticker.
Right. No, that's great. Well, listen, first off, congratulations on being with the newborn, Isabella, right? That's an incredible story. Congratulations on the exit. I think that is something that startups and founders always cheer for. So congratulations on that. And I think that this conversation just shows the maturity of how you think. And this was a great conversation. And one of the people I'm going to connect you with, they're also one of our sponsors. They just pushed out something called Pandio ML. It's an open source ML tool. And I think that since you're looking at tinkering and just seeing other stuff, I'm just going to connect you. These guys are super early, but they're working on some cool stuff. And in my travels, as I find others, I hope it's okay if I connect you with other people.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of open source. It's done me well in my career, so I'm always supportive of it.
Yeah, no, that's one. I'll connect you with these guys. They're doing some cool stuff. And now I think you said you're in Minnesota or Minneapolis. I forget which way you.
Well, I'm in the Minneapolis area.
All right. Well, listen, it's not one of my target cities, but if you ever come down to Miami, you got a friend down here, down south.
Sounds good. It's been a while since I've been there, but the wife keeps telling me she wants to go to somewhere.
Well, come on down. If you do, seriously, let's keep in touch. But if you do come down there, I'd love to see you and grab a drink. And thanks again for being on the show.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having me.
You got it, my man. Bye.
All right, bye.